Now, this started out as a tiny little niche in California. Amazing entrepreneur, individual entrepreneur, who'd seen that the whole car market was stuck in a way, and none of the big car manufacturers were prepared to do the stuff, to bring modern engineering to bear on car design. And he just said, well, why not? We know what to do. It isn't complicated. So using his own money, he actually built the first version of the Tesla. Now it's into its third generation. He's raised more than $750 million. A mass production version of the Tesla, i.e. 75,000 of them, is going to be launched over the course of the next couple of years. Please don't think this is just happening in California, because it isn't. One of the most exciting parts of the world where this is happening is in China. And I just want to bring to your attention an amazing company called Build Your Dreams. Now, I'm sorry to do this because Nick has just told me that we're here in the suite of your new tenant called Chang'an, which is a Chinese car company, no doubt bidding to see off Build Your Dreams as the most successful new car company in China. I say the most successful new car company. Build Your Dreams, up until 10 years ago, was a battery company and built a single car in its history, not one. But once it got the hang of the idea that electric cars are actually all about batteries, not really about the car's the easy bit. The really tricky bit is the battery. And Build Your Dreams is innovating around battery technologies as effectively as any company in the world today. They just said, well, if we can do the battery bit, why the hell shouldn't we do the car bit? I'll come back to that slide in a minute. So this, if you don't like the Tesla, this is the E6, which is Build Your Dreams' first pure EV, all-electric vehicle, which will be on the market in China in the middle of next year, retailing in our terms at about $12,500. Pretty expensive in China. You begin to think, bloody hell, $12,500? Are they going to start exporting those to the UK? That would be interesting. And that's probably why Chang'an has just decided to take a tenancy here in this building to start thinking about market penetration over the course of the next few years. All very riveting. So what did BYD do? Well, it is really interesting. They're pretty cool at PV. They claim to be the best in sector in terms of conversion efficiencies. They claim in China that they're going to be able to do grid parity, which means that PV will cost no more than coal-fired power in China within a few years' time. They're doing all this stuff on batteries, home energy systems. For them, batteries is all about storage systems for every single conceivable use in the car, in the factory, in the home, wherever it might be. Very smart stuff going on. Hybrids, EVs, and just note the thing that brought Build Your Dreams to everybody's attention 3-4 years ago now, when Warren Buffett decided to punt in nearly $1/3 billion to turn this rather clunky, help turn, because the Chinese government's put in rather more than that, help turn this rather clunky battery company into one of the world's fastest growing car companies. So I want to kind of reassure you that when we hear from the oil companies that electric vehicles are still a distant kind of dream, and you really shouldn't be worrying your little heads about them, because the internal combustion engine will rule the roost for the next 2 to 3 decades. Rest assured, that is bollocks. Now, the most enthusiastic proponents of this theory will point you won't be able to see this at the back, I'm really sorry, but I'll explain it. This goes back to the work of a really interesting Russian economist who essentially tried to define the whole history of the Industrial Revolution in terms of different technology platforms that permitted economies to go from relatively primitive states of economic development to increasingly prosperous conditions via intervention around these different technology families. So right back here in the mid-18th century, we have water, iron, mechanization, textiles, then in came steam, railroads, etc. I'm working through very quickly here. Here comes the internal combustion engine in the middle of the 20th century, well, start of the 20th century, massive kind of breakthrough. Petrochemicals, this is the so-called fifth Kondratiev cycle, which was based on ICT, web-enabled technologies, the sort of stuff that we're still enjoying the fruits of today. And boy, has that generated value. Why do you think there are 28 IT billionaires out there today? Because of the massive economic value that it has generated. So the proponents of innovation say, are we now in the foothills of a sixth Kondratiev wave, which lifts the whole of the global economy into a completely different state, in the same way that the IT revolution has done? Are we now going to see investments in resource productivity, biomimicry, green chemistry, nanotechnology, all of these exciting things that are beginning to buzz away out there? And hopefully they're right. The markets, investment markets, reflect this a little bit. 2008, $155 billion invested in clean tech all around the world. That's government all the way through to startup venture capital. $155 billion. Not bad. To get to the target I was showing you, the 50% across the whole world, in terms of reducing carbon dioxide emissions, we'd need to get to something like $500 billion a year. That's a lot of investment. A lot of investment. But we're on the track. Okay, so what's the problem? Why aren't we rocking and rolling and just getting there? And the reason, of course, is that our world is still, unfortunately, heavily influenced by a very strong school of denialists about the science of climate change. Now, I just want to put to rest one or two things. You should all be climate skeptics, okay? However much you think the IPCC is absolutely on the nail and the best source of authority when it comes to reading the science, however much you think that the Royal Society is a better judge of the science of climate change than Nigel Lawson, however much you may be persuaded about all of that, you still ought to be a skeptic. Because science is absolutely based on skepticism. It is based on testing every hypothesis that comes forward, either to the point of destruction, in which case a new hypothesis replaces it, or to the point where it increases in strength, in its ability to marshal evidence in the right kind of way. So every single one of us should be climate skeptics, because good science rests on skepticism. So nobody should get upset when they're described as a climate skeptic, because that's okay. But when we come across this pattern of denialism which we have today, it's a very different story. And climate denialists are completely different from climate skeptics. So a denialist essentially will argue his or her opinion about climate change completely without any reference to the evidence. Or they will adduce the evidence that suits the case that they've got. It's largely driven by ideology or religion, belief comes first, and is characterized by what behavior scientists talk about as confirmation bias, i.e. you pick out every little bit of what's going on out there to confirm the bias in you. So guess what the latest bias is right now here in the UK? Snow. It's been really cold. We haven't even got to Christmas yet. It's not normal to have this amount of really cold weather. So there are lots of people out there now saying, yeah, well, just shows you climate change, global warming, it's all a myth. Yeah, it's getting colder and colder. I don't know what they're on about, these scientists. And the fact that 2010 is likely to be either the second warmest year on record, or possibly the third warmest year, will make no sense to those who cannot tell the difference between weather and climate. I'm assuming that all of you can, okay? But that's what confirmation bias means. It's snowing, climate change, forget it. It's quite difficult to deal with. And lying behind this is the increasingly sophisticated work that's been going on now over the last 20 or 30 years, trying to explain why empirical evidence, factual evidence about the state of the climate is not sufficient to persuade very large numbers of people that we should now be addressing this with increasing urgency.